That morning felt like any other quiet, easy, predictable. The kind of morning I used to love. I was in my garage, packing up my tackle box for a solo fishing trip, something that had become my small escape since Laura passed away 3 years ago. Fishing gave me silence, and silence gave me peace. Or at least it used to. Ethan showed up in the doorway holding a coffee and wearing that familiar fake smile. He tried to sound casual, but after 30 years as a cop in Denver, I could read tension like a headline. His shoulders were too stiff. His voice was just a little too bright. Something wasn't right. While I checked my fishing line, Ethan drifted closer to my tackle box. He pretended to admire the gear, asked a question about lures I'd answered a dozen times before. His movements were deliberate, controlled like someone who'd rehearsed what they were about to do. Then, just as I turned away, I caught it. His right hand slipped something small, wrapped in black tissue paper, between the lures and the sinkers. Most people would have missed it, but not me. After decades of catching lies and half-truths for a living, my instincts didn't sleep just because I was retired. I knew a setup when I saw one. I didn't react. I just kept my head down, pretending to organize the same box I'd organized 100 times before. My pulse was pounding so hard, it felt like the sound filled the garage. Ethan wiped his hands on his jeans, said he had things to do, and disappeared upstairs. His footsteps faded, and I was left with the kind of silence that makes your stomach twist. I stared at that tackle box for a long time. It looked harmless, just a box full of hooks and lines and weekend plans. But now, it felt like it was holding something poisonous. Whatever Ethan had hidden, it wasn't meant to help me. And the worst part, I didn't need to open it to know. My gut already told me my own son had just crossed a line that could destroy us both. 3 years after Laura passed, the house still felt too quiet. Some mornings I'd wake up and forget she was gone just for a second before the silence reminded me. Ethan and I had been living together since then, but it wasn't the same. The closeness we once had was replaced by something tense, fragile. We moved around each other like strangers who happened to share a roof. Ethan had changed more than I wanted to admit. He was restless, jumpy, and always short on cash. At first, I thought it was grief. Losing his mother hit him hard, and I tried to give him time. When he asked for money, I handed it over, telling myself he just needed a little help to get back on his feet. That's what parents do, right? We make excuses for our kids because we love them. But after a while, the excuses stopped making sense. The requests became bigger, the explanations thinner. There were days when his eyes looked clouded, distant, like he was somewhere else entirely. He'd disappear for hours, come back, agitated, his hands shaking just enough for me to notice. I'd ask if everything was okay, and he'd smile and say he was fine. That word fine became his armor. Still, I didn't push too hard. I kept telling myself that he just needed space, that things would settle down. Maybe I was afraid of what I'd find if I looked too closely. As a cop, I'd spent my career uncovering other people's lies. But as a father, I realized I wasn't ready to face my own son's truth. Even then, deep down, I knew something was coming. A man can feel when a storm is building inside his own home. And the day I saw Ethan slip that black-wrapped package into my tackle box, I knew the storm had finally arrived. Dinner that night started like any other, quiet, almost peaceful. I grilled some chicken on the patio while Ethan set the table inside. The smell of smoke and the sound of crickets made it feel almost normal again. For a moment, I let myself believe we were okay, that maybe the tension between us was fading. But I should have known better. Calm moments in my house had become warnings, not blessings. Ethan sat across from me, barely touching his food. His fork scraped the plate, a nervous rhythm that filled the silence. Finally, he looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, the kind of red that comes from more than just exhaustion. "Dad," he started, voice shaky but deliberate. "I need to talk to you about something. It's serious." I put my fork down and waited. He hesitated, then said it. "I need $50,000. At first, I thought I'd misheard. $50,000, I asked, trying to keep my tone even. "What kind of trouble are you in?" His face tightened. "Financial trouble," he said quickly. Like that explained everything. When I pressed for details, his patience snapped. "Does it matter?" he barked. "I'm your son. I need your help." That sentence cut deep, not because of what he said, but how he said it. There was no humility in his voice, no trace of the kid who once asked me for $5 to buy a soda. Just demand. Just desperation wrapped in anger. I reminded him that I'd already helped paid his rent, covered his car payments, stocked his fridge. His jaw clenched and he stood so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "You don't understand, Dad. These people aren't patient. They're not going to wait for me to figure this out." "What people?" "Ethan," I asked. But he was already walking away, muttering something I couldn't catch. His bedroom door slammed upstairs, shaking the frame. I sat there in the half-empty dining room, staring at his untouched plate. Something inside me twisted. This wasn't just about money anymore. I'd seen that kind of fear before on suspects who'd run out of options. I didn't know what Ethan had gotten himself into, but I knew one thing for sure. Whatever it wasn't something money alone could fix. I stood in the garage, staring at my tackle box like it had turned into a bomb. The air felt heavy, charged with something I couldn't name. Every instinct I had told me to walk away, but curiosity and fear held me there. My hands shook a little as I unclasped the metal latches, the sound echoing through the quiet like gunfire. That box had always been a symbol of peace for me. Fishing was where I went to forget the noise of the world. But now, even before I opened it, I could feel that peace slipping away. I lifted the tray of lures and hooks, my pulse pounding in my ears. There, nestled between a silver spoon lure and a lead weight, was a small bundle wrapped in black tissue paper. The same one Ethan had slipped in earlier. It looked so ordinary, but I'd been around long enough to know that danger rarely announces itself. I unwrapped it slowly, like peeling back the truth I didn't want to face. The tissue paper fell away, and what I saw made my stomach drop. A clear plastic bag filled with white powder. Even without testing it, I knew. Fentanyl. I'd seen enough of it during my years on the force to recognize it instantly. I just sat there for a while, holding it, feeling the cold weight of it in my palm. 2 ounces, maybe more, enough to ruin a man's life forever. Enough to send me to prison for the rest of mine. My mind raced. Why would Ethan do this? Why hide it in my tackle box? And then it hit me like a punch to the chest. He wanted me to find it, but not right away. He wanted someone else to find it first. The police. The realization cut through me sharper than any betrayal I'd ever known. My son, my only son, was setting me up. I thought of all the times I'd defended him, the money I'd given, the patience I'd stretched thin, trying to believe he'd turn things around. I wanted to think addiction was the worst of it. But this was something darker. This was intentional, calculated. For 30 years I'd built a career on spotting lies, but I never imagined I'd miss the one that mattered most. I looked at that bag again and felt something shift inside me. The shock began to fade, replaced by a cold, steady focus. Whatever game Ethan was playing, I wasn't going to lose. Not this time. I moved through Ethan's room like I had learned to move on the job. Quiet, methodical taking in details most people miss. I wasn't snooping for malice. I was trying to understand how deep this went. What I found made my stomach drop. There were phone records shoved under a stack of old T-shirts, numbers scrawled on scraps of paper, with notes like Marco Urgent, and a name I didn't know at first, Nico Ramirez. Receipts and betting slips were tucked into a drawer. They pointed to a pattern I'd seen before: frantic cash withdrawals, quick trips to the casino, losses covered by more losses. Then I found loan paperwork in a manila folder, pages someone had tried to hide under a pile of textbooks. My name was on those papers, my signature, signed away. The mortgage and a loan agreement listed my address as collateral. At first, I thought it was a mistake, maybe a bad copy. But the handwriting expert I later brought in said the signature was forged. Someone had used my name to pledge my house without my knowledge. I felt sick reading the numbers, the cash advances, the payday loans, the unofficial loan from Bianca Torres with predatory terms. It all added up to a trap. Ethan hadn't just been in debt. He had been tangled with people who didn't stop at threats. Nico's number kept appearing in recorded calls I found on his phone. Urgent whispers about a deadline, threats if payment wasn't made. It painted a brutal picture. Ethan was trapped between a lender who would foreclose and a dealer who wanted cash. And the only way out, he planned, was to turn me into the scapegoat. Hearing his voice on recordings, panicked, bargaining, promising, was worse than any confession. I could hear him making deals, arranging payments, begging for time. It was proof not of a moment of weakness, but of a pattern of deception. He wasn't just sinking. He was pushing me under to save himself. At that point, shock gave way to resolve. I photographed everything, made copies, and put the originals back where I found them. If there was a legal fight ahead, I needed a record. I called an attorney who specialized in fraud and elder protections, and I started to catalog dates and transactions. Practically, the first steps were simple, secure evidence, limit exposure, and get professional help. For families facing something similar, I'd advise the same. Don't confront alone. Document everything. Speak with an attorney about forged documents and contact law enforcement if threats or criminal activity are involved. Emotionally, it's a different battle. It's easy to want to fix things yourself to keep protecting the person you raised. But when addiction drags someone into criminal schemes, protecting yourself becomes a moral duty. I learned that hard truth in the silence of my son's room, surrounded by the paper trail of choices that had led him here. I stood in the garage with that small bag of white powder on my workbench and felt the world narrow down to one clear fact. I was in danger, and doing nothing was not an option. For a long, ugly second, I let myself imagine the worst. The knock on the door, the cuffs, the headlines. Then the part of me that had spent 30 years in investigations took over, not out of spite, but to protect myself and to make sure the truth ended up in the right hands. I made a plan, but I kept it simple. I handled the bag as little as I could because fentanyl is dangerous. Even a tiny amount can be lethal. I wrapped it back up and put it somewhere I could control. I cleaned the tackle box and the workbench thoroughly, removing anything that might point back to me. I didn't post about it on social media. I didn't confront Ethan that night. I cleared surfaces and wiped down the spots he might have touched more to remove ambiguity than to hide anything. My goal was to avoid giving him the easy, believable story he wanted. Then I moved the package into Ethan's car. I won't go into the mechanics of how this isn't a how-to. What matters is the thinking behind it. I wanted the evidence to be where it would be expected if someone had framed me. I wanted the story to be coherent to investigators. If someone reported seeing drugs in my tackle box, but the drugs turned up in his car, the trail pointed toward the person who had motive and access. It was a chess move, born of years of watching criminals set traps and then get sloppy. That decision was not comfortable. It felt like stepping over a line I had never imagined crossing as a father. There was anger, yes, but also a cold, practical clarity. I photographed everything before I moved it. The loan documents, the betting slips, the car's contents as I found them. I made records with timestamps on my phone. I saved voicemail snippets and noted the dates and times of the calls I'd overheard. Documentation was my safeguard. If this went to court, I wanted a paper trail that showed I was responding, not creating a crime scene. I also took precautions I wish I'd known earlier to recommend to others. Don't handle suspected fentanyl if you can avoid it. Call local law enforcement or a public health agency and tell them you found a suspicious substance. Get legal advice before taking any steps that could put you or someone else at risk. If you fear immediate harm, inform the police and request protection or a welfare check. For anyone facing similar threats from a loved one's criminal entanglements, prioritize safety and legal counsel over solitary heroics. After I'd done what I felt I had to do, I sat and listened. The house was quiet, and the waiting was the hardest part. In my job, we learned patience as a tactic. You wait for the other side to move, and then you watch how their confidence cracks. This was one of those times. I'd set the board. Now I had to let the pieces fall. That night the house felt too still. the kind of silence that hums in your ears. I sat in the living room pretending to watch the news, but really, I was waiting. I knew Ethan's next move was coming. I just didn't know when. My instincts were right. It started with the faint creak of floorboards upstairs, followed by the muffled sound of his voice through the wall. I turned off the TV. The quiet let his words carry farther than he thought. He was on the phone, speaking quickly, the tone low and tense. I could make out enough to understand what was happening. He wasn't calling for help. He was calling the police to report me. He told them I was trafficking drugs, described exactly where they could find the evidence, down to the detail of my tackle box in the garage. He gave them my name, my age, the address. He even said I'd been acting nervous, that he feared I might move the stash before they arrived. Every lie rolled off his tongue as smoothly as if he'd practiced it. I sat there, breathing slow, letting the anger settle into something colder. He was setting me up to save himself, and he thought I'd never see it coming. I didn't move, didn't interrupt. A lifetime in law enforcement had taught me the value of patience. Let people dig their own holes. When he hung up, I heard him make another call. His tone changed sharper now. "It's done." He told someone I recognized the name, Nico. Then another call followed, softer, but rushed. Bianca. He was reassuring them both, promising the problem would be taken care of soon, that I'd be arrested before morning. It was the sound of a man who believed he'd finally outsmarted the world. I leaned back in my chair and looked toward the dark window, the reflection of my own face staring back. I didn't feel hatred, not yet, just an empty kind of sorrow. A father shouldn't have to listen to his son orchestrate his downfall. But there I was, sitting in the house I'd built, waiting for flashing lights to paint the driveway. Part of me wanted to confront him right then, to shout, to demand why. But another part, the cop, the strategist, knew better. This was the endgame, and timing mattered. I had already moved the evidence, already cleared my tracks. All that was left was to stay calm and let the truth reveal itself. When you've lived long enough, you learn that sometimes silence is the loudest answer. So I stayed quiet, ready for whatever came next. I'd faced criminals who thought they were clever before. I never imagined one of them would be my own son. But I also knew this Ethan had underestimated the one person who taught him how to think ahead. The sound of tires on gravel broke the stillness outside. Through the window, flashing lights painted the driveway in red and blue. I didn't flinch. I'd spent too many years on the other side of that scene to mistake what was coming. The officers fanned out, moving with practiced precision, and leading them was a face I recognized, Detective Maya Alvarez, my former colleague from the Denver Police Department. Maya had that same calm authority. She always carried the kind that settled chaos before words were even spoken. When she knocked, I opened the door like I'd done this 1,000 times. "Evening, Maya," I said. She looked at me with a mix of regret and duty. "David, we need to talk," she replied, her tone professional but steady. Behind her stood a team of DEA agents, scanning the property, ready to move. I caught a glimpse of Ethan at the top of the stairs, pretending to look confused. He walked down, playing his part perfectly. The concerned son, caught in a storm. "What's going on?" he asked, voice dripping with innocence. Maya glanced between us. "We received a report about narcotics being stored here," she said. "We have a warrant to search the property." Ethan jumped in before I could respond. "Drugs? That's impossible. My father would never." He turned toward Maya, lowering his voice like he wanted to help. "But if you're looking for anything suspicious, he's been working in the garage all morning. You might want to check there." My jaw tightened, but I kept my face neutral. "It's fine," I said. "Let them look." We walked out to the garage. Ethan hovered near the door, too eager, eyes locked on my tackle box sitting on the workbench. Maya nodded to one of the agents who photographed everything before opening the lid. I watched him move the lures, the hooks, the spare line, every motion slow, deliberate. Nothing. The agent checked again this time, emptying the box completely. Still nothing. Maya frowned slightly, then turned toward Ethan. "You seem very certain about what we'd find here," she said. "Why is that Ethan's confidence cracked for the first time?" I thought I saw him hide something," he stammered. "Maybe he moved it." "Maybe," Maya said softly, her eyes narrowing. "Let's check your vehicle next." Color drained from Ethan's face. "My car? Why would you search my car? I'm the one who called." But the team was already on the move. They opened the trunk, lifted the old gym bag, and found it the same black-wrapped bundle I'd placed there earlier. When the agent pulled out the clear bag of fentanyl, the air seemed to vanish from the room. Ethan took a step back, shaking his head. "That's not mine. He planted that. My father, he's framing me." Maya's expression hardened. "Then why did you tell us to search his tackle box instead of your own car?" she asked. Ethan didn't have an answer. The handcuffs clicked sharp and final. I stood still, the weight of everything pressing down at once. Grief, anger, relief. He looked at me as they led him away, eyes wide with betrayal. "You did this," he hissed. I met his gaze evenly. "I warned you, son. Every trap eventually catches the one who set it." Maya lingered for a moment before she left, giving me a look that said more than words could. The flashing lights faded down the street, leaving the house silent again. I was alone, but this time the quiet felt like something else, something closer to peace. The courtroom felt colder than I remembered, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and stays there, no matter how long you sit. Ethan sat a few rows ahead of me, dressed in an orange jumpsuit that made him look smaller, fragile, even though I knew what he had done. I'd seen criminals in every shape and story, but watching your own son sitting in that seat is a kind of pain that has no training manual. Judge Whitman read through the charges in a voice that carried the weight of finality. Possession of fentanyl with intent to distribute, filing a false police report, conspiracy to frame a family member. The words echoed through the room like a slow, tolling bell. Ethan's lawyer tried to soften the edges. Addiction, desperation, grief. But none of it could rewrite what was already clear. The evidence spoke louder than any apology. When the judge asked if Ethan had anything to say, he stood, voice barely above a whisper. He said he was sorry that he never meant for things to go that far, but it wasn't the kind of apology that comes from understanding. It was survival, an attempt to sound human before the sentence fell. 5 years. That's what Judge Whitman decided. 5 years in federal prison. The gavel hit the desk, and in that sound 30 years of fatherhood ended. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The well had run dry long before that moment. As they led Ethan away, I didn't see a son anymore. I saw the consequences of every moment I'd chosen, patience over accountability, hope over truth. I remembered Laura's last words, asking me to be gentle with him, to give him time. And I had. Too much time, maybe. I had mistaken love for rescue, patience for forgiveness. In the end, that kind of blind patience doesn't save anyone. It destroys both sides. When court adjourned, people filed out quietly, leaving me sitting there in the echo of what used to be a family. I stayed until the bailiff asked me to leave. On the drive home, the city looked different. The same streets I'd driven for decades now felt foreign, emptied of the life I once built. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at an untouched cup of coffee. For the first time, I let myself feel the truth. I couldn't fix what was broken in him, and trying had almost broken me too. Sometimes love isn't about saving someone. It's about learning when to stop letting them drown you. 2 months after the sentencing, I sold the house. It wasn't an impulsive decision. It was the kind that grows quietly inside you, until one day you realize you're ready to let go. The place had once been filled with life. Laura's laughter in the kitchen, Ethan's footsteps on the stairs, the smell of Sunday dinners drifting through the rooms. But after everything, those memories no longer brought comfort. They felt like ghosts I couldn't live with anymore. The realtor said the market was good and the house sold faster than I expected. Watching the moving truck pull away that morning, I didn't feel relief exactly. It was more like closing a door on a version of myself I could no longer carry forward. Every wall in that house had witnessed my hope, my mistakes, and the moment my own son tried to destroy me. Staying there felt like trying to breathe underwater. I found a small apartment in Boulder, with a balcony overlooking the mountains. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and it was quiet. I bought new furniture, kept only the essentials, my fishing gear, a few of Laura's photos, and the kind of silence that didn't hurt. For the first time in years, I could feel what peace actually sounded like. Ethan wrote to me twice from prison. Both letters are still on my counter, unopened. I've thought about reading them, but every time I reach for the envelope, something inside me stops. Maybe one day I'll be ready, but right now, I'm not sure there's anything inside those letters that could change what's already done. Forgiveness is complicated when love and betrayal live in the same space. Sometimes I take my tackle box, the same one that started it all, and drive up to a lake just outside the city. I cast my line watch, the ripples spread, and let the past drift a little farther away each time. The mountains don't care about human messes. They just stand there, reminding you that life keeps going no matter who stays or leaves. I've learned that protecting yourself doesn't mean you've stopped loving someone. It means you finally understand that love without boundaries isn't kindness, it's surrender. And sometimes the hardest act of love is refusing to let someone else's darkness pull you down with them.